Hi, my name's Erwin, and this is the Poetry Lighthouse podcast. In today's episode, I had the pleasure to interview the British poet, musician, and artist Atmos, who will talk about his poetry collection, Poetry for the Blind. So, hello, welcome to the podcast, and thank you so much for being here today. It is a pleasure to have you and to discuss about your poetry and other types of art. So today I would like you to please introduce yourself and to tell us a little bit more about your background and what brought you here as a poet.
Yes, sure. So my name's Atmos, and so I originally started in music actually. So my background is in music when I was a kid. I started off with the recorder, quickly got bored of that, and then I moved on to viola, but I didn't really stick at that either. But a few years after that, I ended up picking up the guitar, and since that point, it was a turning point for me in my background with like the creative arts. And I ended up going to study music a lot more after that. I went through college first, and then I eventually went to university as well to get a degree in music. And I never actually thought I would go into poetry. It's never something I was really interested in, either writing or reading. But then once the whole thing happened with COVID, I felt like I needed a project to kind of work on. And the first poem I wrote was actually when I was at uni, but I never really thought anything of it. I kind of just had an idea and I wanted to get that out on paper. But once COVID kind of came around, I had a lot of free time because I didn't see a lot of my friends at that time for obvious reasons. And I just started writing. I just started having a go at it with no expectations. And after I wrote a few poems I thought were pretty good, I thought maybe I should actually do a book and sort of set myself the challenge to do that. So that was my my lockdown project.
So glad that you got down to explore new ways of art. It's always nice to get into something different and explore it, because we might find out that we have some sort of talent. Or how do you feel about these different types of art? Does it provide you some specific feeling or sort of relief? Is it all the same, or do you feel a bit different when you perform these different types of art?
Yeah, it's a good question actually. It is something I've thought about before. So if I take the book firstly, so I think writing poetry, especially during COVID, was very therapeutic for me. There was a lot of personal stuff that went into the book, but it became wider than that. It became something that I thought, a lot of issues affect us on a wider scale. So I thought I would kind of try and bring that in, not only was it therapeutic, I thought it could be kind of inspirational and helpful for other people. So that's kind of why I started doing poetry. With music, I guess in some ways it was kind of the same. Like when I was a kid, I've always been an introvert, so I'm more of kind of like keeping to myself. I do like to be social here and there, but for me, music was kind of a way to kind of, I don't know, get my own sort of feelings out, because I might not have been able to communicate them the traditional way when I was a kid. And music kind of was a bridge to being able to communicate with like-minded people. And it was a language that I quickly became familiar with how to speak. So for me, music is kind of about bringing people together, for me personally. So my thing with music has always been playing in bands or like playing with other musicians, writing with other musicians. And that for me is kind of my heart in music. That's what I strive to do. But whereas my writing stuff is more of it's more of like an individual journey, really, because I write fiction as well, and it's a very sort of place of solitude for me. Whereas music is more kind of branching out with other people. Yeah, that's kind of how I see it anyway.
That's wonderful. It's very inspiring to hear that, because it is true that sometimes it serves as though it was a different language, and as though a certain means of expression would do something that another one cannot provide as easily. So with
Yeah.
poetry, it's really nice that you know, and you said that really well, that it's more like about yourself. You feel more connected to your senses, whereas music is more to share about, to share with other people. I think that's a good way to see it, and yeah, it's great. That's like what I think poetry should be, something that more people should practice because it helps for mental health, I think. So
Just
that
to quickly add on to that, actually. So I think, so I said about poetry being like an individual journey. So I think after I said that, I've just realized that that's more so for the writing, because I do spoken word live as well sometimes. I think that's kind of where you sort of bridge the gap and you turn it from an individual experience to a shared experience. So I thought that was worth mentioning too.
Yeah, it's like listening to the lyrics of a singer, and you might say, well, this could be read as poetry, but when it's performed, it's shared by so many people, and it just becomes something that we all kind of feel. But interestingly enough, we all feel it in different ways because we analyze things differently. So I think that's also really interesting about sharing our work with other people, because you know it's
Mm.
always it's nice to hear people who go through similar things, because at the end of the day, even if we feel it's very personal, a lot of
Yeah.
people can relate to it. So that's really
Yeah, that's why I mean, like, it kind of like starts as an individual thing with poetry for me, and then now it's kind of becoming bigger than me. You know, I like that because I've kind of had to let go of it now, and I'm kind of, it's in the world. You know, people are reading it, and people, even though I wrote poems about a certain theme or the way I wrote it, no one's going to necessarily interpret it the same way. Some people might, but everyone's got their own opinion with that. You know, nothing's right or wrong. So
yeah, that's wonderful. That's what I love about art. It's always about interpretation.
yeah.
And so I'm wondering, how did you get inspired or motivated to write poetry, or in your case, also to write music?
Mhm. So I'll start with the poetry first. So as I mentioned earlier, it's something I never really expected to get into. But when I was at uni, I had a lot of free time in between lectures, and I tended to go to coffee shops a lot to get work done. But sometimes I kind of just went to kind of work on creative stuff that was outside of my studies. And one thing that kind of stuck in my mind was a story that I heard about my late uncle. He was, I forget exactly which war or battles he was in, but he was in the army for quite a while. And yeah, I heard a story that on this particular occasion he was in this sort of battle, and his I don't know if it was his best friend, but there was a really close friend that was with him there, and he actually got shot in the head right next to him, which was obviously quite a, you know, a big event for that to witness, you know, for you to witness it. And yeah, that kind of inspired me to sort of like write my first poem. I'm pretty sure the first one I wrote is the one that's called War in my book. And that was before I even thought about doing a book. I kind of just thought, you know, how must it feel to go through that kind of experience? Because it's it's not something anybody would want to go through. You know, it's quite a life-changing experience. And I guess it got me thinking about how he feels about that, because I don't know if he did get PTSD from it or anything like that, but I know that he did experience night terrors, and I think that can probably be linked to things like PTSD. So that kind of inspired me to write a poem about, you know, the war that he was in, and how these things can have such a psychological impact on us as well. You know, once we actually leave that scenario. Um, you asked about music as well, didn't you? I forget what your
Yeah,
question was.
I just wanted to take upon that specific topic because I feel it's important. It reminds me of some of the modernist writers who, you know, after the war, they used to pour all their sufferings through poetry or writing in general
Yeah.
in order
Mhm.
to express this kind of trauma that was experienced through war, because it was like a universal trauma. And I
Mhm.
think it's so interesting to look into that, because even in on a psychological level, it kind of brings out a lot of things that sometimes we don't even realize about ourselves or about our
Yeah.
past. and it could be a healing mechanism as well. And absolutely, I think yeah, sometimes we get motivated, not in necessarily in a way of, oh, let the muse come in, but more like, you know, through our experiences that allows us to kind of, you know, just get it on the paper, not even to be read, but, you know, just to get them out there. So I think that's
Yeah,
really interesting. All right.
that's
And yeah, so I also was asking for your music, the music process. How do you come to imagine the lyrics? How does it sound in your head, or how do you come up with them?
so with music. So I do write lyrics as well, but I would say primarily I'm more of like a instrumentalist. Kind of lyrics and song kind of comes after for me. But my kind of process with that, you know, especially my earlier sort of songs that I wrote, or you know, musical ideas, it was again kind of like a therapeutic way of me getting my own personal kind of issues out, or kind of my own way to heal with them. But if you sort of fast forward to today, the kind of stuff I write is more, I say it's more in line with the vastness of the poetry I write. It's kind of, it might have originally started as an individual thing, but now I try to write more like thought provoking, or like kind of quite out there ideas, you know, whether that's instrumentally or with lyrics as well. Um, and I'm a massive fan of things like, you know, sci-fi, the idea of space exploration, things like that. But then also trying to target things that are currently going on in the world right now that I feel we need to deal with first before we even think about things like that. And the music I create tends to be quite ambient by nature now. And I think part of that is because of the influences I've had in the past. I'm a massive fan of bands like Pink Floyd, and there's another band called Tool as well. And these kind of bands have kind of brought these ideas, or sort of helped me to kind of refine my process with writing. So yeah.
Fantastic. That's really nice. Thank you for that. And so I noticed that. So you do many different types of art. You express yourself through different means. One is poetry, another one is music. Do you have any other?
Yeah, I seem to have a long list of things with that. um, so one of the other ones that's kind of in the background at the moment is writing fiction. And that kind of started off the same way as poetry, actually. I ended up just writing maybe like half a chapter or a chapter. Didn't really think anything of it. I just thought, I have this idea, I want to write it down before I forget it. And after that, it kind of started, I kind of like added a little bit more on, and like over time, I'm at about 30K words so far. So it's still quite early days, but that kind of progressed into an actual story. And I started thinking about, you know, the plot, how to bring different characters in, and then also taking in inspirations from my own life that I can kind of bring a personal touch to the story as well, to kind of, I don't know, bring my world into a fiction world. Um, so yeah, there's that. Um, I'm also getting into photography recently as well, so I haven't quite started yet, but I have started reading into it, and trying to learn the sort of technical specifications about cameras and how to kind of get results that you want. And the reason I kind of started going into this direction is because um, quite a few years ago, I think it was maybe around 2016 or 2017, I went to Iceland for the first time, and it left a big mark on me. I really fell in love with Iceland, I think, after that first trip. And that ended up leading to an EP of music that is still in progress, but it's almost finished, called Highlands. And that's like an orchestral sort of folk acoustic guitar kind of mashup, really. And I did originally have a different piece of work in mind for the artwork, but after a bit of time, my taste had changed, and I thought I'm more into sort of real photos and things like that for using like artwork for photos, for like music. And I thought, well, I could just get someone to, you know, take the photo for me, or find one that's already there, which is what I did for my first release, which is called Echoes. And I used a photo of the Milky Way for that, but a really high quality one that an astrophotographer had taken. One that I don't think I would have been able to do, not without years of training, you know, to get the equipment and the sort of know-how to do it. But with the Iceland stuff, I wanted to take a photo of the Highlands for the Highlands EP, and I thought something was just driving me to go and do that myself, because I feel like it's going to be a life-changing experience, and so begins the journey of me kind of getting more into photography, really. So, yeah.
That sounds very interesting. So, uh, I mean, I wonder, you have different platforms where you share this stuff, or do you have a one in which you share everything and you put everything in one single place?
You mean like socials? Do you mean like social media?
Yeah, do you have different social media for each art, or do you put everything together?
So I did think about that a long time ago, but for me, because I do so much, I feel like I'd need so many different accounts to sort of dedicate it to things like that. So I just decided to go for I've got a Facebook, I've got Instagram and TikTok, but they're kind of almost the same format of what I share there. The main reason I do that is to try and reach people on different platforms. But if we take my Instagram, for example, recently I've been posting guitar content on there. Some examples from my poetry book as well. And then it could be photos I've taken from a trip to Scotland that I went to early this year. Um, but I kind of want the freedom to be able to post whatever I want, because although I'm into photography, music, and poetry at the moment, I could go on to something completely different in a few years, and I want a space to be able to share that. So
So it's
yeah,
more like you know, the artist general kind of account in which you put all
yeah,
of your different means. That's really good. So everyone can find the different facets of you and your art. That's really good. I
yeah.
feel that's great. And so speaking of your new poetry collection, could you talk to us a little bit more about what it is about and how did you manage to get it out there?
Yeah, sure. So the poetry book is called Poetry for the Blind. It's not a literal title. I have been called out on that before, but it's a metaphor basically. So it's poetry for people that can't see what's going on really, and that could be either within themselves with their own personal lives. Could be to do with issues that are going on in the world. Some of the other themes are about concerns for where we're heading as a species. Because there's a lot of new technologies that are coming out. We're on the brink of war all the time. We are actually in war, with the whole Ukraine thing that's been going on. And it's trying to sort of shed a light for people to sort of open their eyes to what's going on around them and to pay more attention, because it's so easy, as I'm sure you'll probably agree, to get stuck in our own sort of individual experience and kind of shut out everything else that doesn't sort of fit into that. Um, and that's kind of where the book came from, really. I started writing out about personal experiences to start with in a way that I feel could help other people. So some of the things I wrote about is, topics like getting bullied. A lot of people experience bullying when they're younger. Um, and that's something that we kind of have to navigate as we get older as well, because of the psychological, I guess, footprint it kind of leaves behind. Um, Also things like, addiction. A lot of people think of addiction as just, it could be alcohol or cigarettes or things like that, but really everything's a drug, because we can get hooked on anything, whether it's TV, it could be sex, it could be the usual things like alcohol, but it's something that we all experience. And I think we have a real problem with addiction in society. It's kind of almost promoted in some ways, like it's almost like they want us to be addicted. So I try and raise awareness of all these different issues, and hopefully by the end of the book, for the people that do read it, they kind of they have some time to reflect and they can think about the things I've said and kind of draw their own conclusions from it in a way that helps them make the world a better place, even if it's just starting from themselves before branching out. So yeah, I hope that answers that question.
Oh, that's fantastic. I mean, I'm so eager to read your poetry collection, and I think it's very life-changing. And it really talks about the various sort of issues. So I think that's also a very nice mixed bag so that you can,
Yeah.
really relate to more than one poem out there, which is really nice. Always, we all go through those type of challenges in life. So thank you for that.
Well,
That's wonderful.
welcome. I mean, that's kind of the hope of the book, really, that sort of people can feel connected to something like bigger than themselves, because basically everything I've talked about in the book, it does affect us all, really, even if it is as individuals. There's so many people that are affected by these issues on the individual level. Could be people they know. It could even be the person reading it as well. So it could sort of help them to navigate through those struggles.
Yeah, that sounds amazing. Thank you so much.
Welcome.
So if you want, we could start reading a few of your poems
Yeah.
and, talk a little bit about them more in detail. So for today, I asked you to pick three poems. So
Yeah.
you can start in the order that you want. So would you like to start maybe by reading one of them?
Yes, of course. Yeah.
Fantastic.
Just because I've got it here, I might as well show the copy of the book. So
Was it your production? Did you paint it?
yeah, so this painting, so I actually have it behind me here. I'll just bring it to the camera so you can see. So this is actually quite old. I wrote this when I was at sorry, not wrote this. I painted this when I was at uni. And I just did it for fun, really. I've always been fascinated with eyes, because I feel like you can tell so much about a person from their eyes. And people say things like it's the gateway to the soul and things like that. I mean, whether you believe that or not, I still think eyes are very powerful, and they can tell us a lot. But yeah, I wrote that when sorry, saying wrote again. So I painted that when I was at uni. I think it was my second year of uni, and I just felt like painting. So I just got some art supplies, thought I'm just gonna give it a go, and I just used an image I think I found on the internet as like my subject. And I just had a go at it, and it turned out a lot better than I thought it would. And then years later, after I started writing the poems, and it kind of all the dots just kind of got connected, and I thought I want to use this as the front cover because it's my own work, which I really liked. And it linked to the theme. The two complement each other very well. So yeah.
That's fantastic. So you're not just a poet and a musician and now a future photographer, but you're also a painter. That's really amazing.
Yeah, so I've done a bit of painting. I would say painting is sort of the thing I do the least when I do create art. Most of the time, I'm more of an ink drawer. But I've found recently that whilst I appreciate what I've done in the past, photography is kind of becoming that form of art instead for me. So it's kind of taking over in its place. So, but yeah.
Fantastic. Sometimes we go through phases in our lives that we transform one type of art into another, and it kind of translates, and that's wonderful. That's always really nice.
Yeah, I think it's really important to recognize that as well, because we're not meant to stay the same. We are meant to grow. And sometimes that means letting go of things that we think we should hold on to. And that could be, it could be a certain art form that we've always done, but now we're not enjoying it as much, or we're not getting that calling. And that's kind of how I feel with sort of fine art or like painting. I might do it again in the future, but I think photography is now like I'm quite passionate about that at the moment. So I think the other thing with art as well, at least for myself, I know a lot of artists will be able to relate to this. I'm very messy. I don't like cleaning up. And I'm hoping by switching to photography that I can kind of mitigate that a bit.
So that was a nice chat. But could we jump into one of your poems?
Yes, absolutely. Okay, so this is Succession. Climate change, the price of progress, an excuse. Mining for gold to fund a capitalist dream of material we choose to produce. Cutting down trees rooted for thousands of years. Biodiversity destroyed to make way for industrial gears. Killing habitats, a method of manufacturing. Breaking the chains of food to profit from hydraulic fracturing. Burning fossil fuels to generate chemical ammunition. Clouds retaliate and administer acid to restore balance by deposition. Radiation, a slow poison scarring the surface and dictating drought. Fertile ground becomes hostile as water is seldom throughout. A pioneer of succession in regions where life cannot be sustained. The aftermath of mass extinction, a path which can be restrained. Thank you.
Thanks for the reading. That was really wonderful. And I like the fact that, you know, when you hear it, like being read out loud, it kind of feels a bit different because you can hear the rhymes as well. It's
Yeah,
very well structured. It has very
thanks.
specific, you know, rhythm, and that's really nice. I really liked as well the imagery and the fact that the theme of this poem is so relevant nowadays, you know,
Yeah.
about the climate change. And could you tell us a bit more about what you think you want the reader to be, you know, what's the takeaway for the reader?
Yeah, sure. So with this poem, so you're absolutely right. So it definitely leads into the whole idea of climate change. So I guess like takeaways for this poem, it's to do with the fact that, you know, we can change, we can make things better for the planet and, you know, for all of the life that's on this planet. But we kind of have to start tackling it, you know, now, and also on an individual level, we can make that change. I think the problem with a lot of people is they feel that, oh, you know, if this person isn't doing, let's say, recycling, for example, why should I bother doing it? But the problem is with that kind of way of thinking is you get billions of people thinking that same way and nothing changes. You know, you have to be the change that you want to see. And if you want the world to change, you do have to do your part. You can't expect everyone else to do it for you. And by doing that, you can inspire other people to make that change too. So it can have like a domino effect. Um, so yeah, I guess to cut it short, the takeaway really is that, you know, we're living through a time where our planet's in crisis and we need to do something about it before it's too late. So yeah.
Yeah, I'm just looking back at the poem and I find very interesting thing because you also kind of look at or take on many different elements of climate change. It's not just the fact of cutting trees, but also the burning of fossil fuels. And it's kind
Yeah.
of like each stanza takes on a different issue. And I
Yeah.
think that's really nice. So we can kind of see what the problems are and what are the things that we should stop doing for each of these stanzas, so for each of these issues. I think that's really nice. Also, the radiation and um, and then the mass extinction, also the repercussions of you know, climate change
Yeah.
as we are seeing it. You also mentioned biodiversity is destroyed.
Yeah.
So we're seeing kind of like a good, well-rounded combination of all the
Yeah.
knowledge and notions around climate change. And I think that's brilliant when, especially if we want to, you know, explain to someone else about what's climate change in a few words. We could just, you know, give them this poem, and
I appreciate that.
it's
That's quite
wonderful.
with this poem, I mean, it's one of those that, like I said before, you know, there's some more individual level poems, but this is one that definitely affects everyone. So there's, you know, there's no reason not to sort of work towards bettering that particular issue, because, you know, it's not just, you're not just doing it for yourself or like for someone else. We're doing it for everyone, and ultimately, you know, this is our home. We should look after it.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think you're right in saying that, you know, sometimes we feel that, oh, so if someone else is not doing it, why should I do it, right? I myself have felt that way a lot of times, you know, and it comes as well when it comes to eating, you know, to reduce our consumption of meat and
Yeah.
dairy products and stuff. It's all kind of in the same package.
Yeah.
And it's as we it would be easier if we all would act individually, because
Yeah.
that could make the big change, you know, as well. Uh,
Start person. You know,
Exactly. It starts small and then you keep the ball rolling, and it comes to a big effect at the end that it really can make a change. I really like that, because most of the time we think, oh, I'll just wait because it's not my issue. It should be the big companies to do this. And like, yes, in part, yes, but that won't change if our consumption is the same. So in a way, we also have to individually have more ethical choices about the environment and what we consume and how do we live our daily life. So absolutely.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. Yeah, definitely.
Fantastic. I really love that poem. I think it was brilliant, and the rhymes just really well done.
Just wanted to quickly add on to that as well. The title of that poem,
Mhm.
that came from when I was studying biology. I think it's when I was in secondary school. And I don't know if you know, but succession is, let's see if I can remember now. So succession is basically where you've got an area that the conditions have been so hostile for life. Like let's take a tree or a plant, for example, that most of them just cannot survive there. But over time, there will be one that kind of is what we call a pioneer, I think, and that can survive these hostile conditions somehow. And from that process, from that one plant, for example, growing, it can sort of be a building block for other plants to grow because the conditions start changing. And it just goes to show that, one thing can make a big difference. You can have this one plant that can then sort of completely populate an area. And then from there, you get wildlife that join in and, trees and all that kind of thing.
That's interesting. That's very interesting, because I was wondering, okay, succession. I'm not really acquainted with the notion of succession in this specific context.
That's great. I'm glad I mentioned that then.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you for mentioning that. So, would you like to go to the second poem?
Yes, absolutely. So this second one, this is called Machines. A complex organism, unique and full of potential. A human being, body and mind together and essential. Assembled in a line on a factory floor, soft tissue will become hardened steel. Are we losing our humanity, that which allows us to feel? Piece by piece, find another part to replace. Throw away a weak body. Change the recognizable features of a face. A control system to replace the brain, made of circuit boards and cables. Integrating computer chips, weaved with wires. Altering our senses to not experience pain. A fixation with technology, turning skin into silicon and bone into metal, the blueprint for our biology. Corrective surgery, the manipulation of a gene, editing DNA is a precursor to man becoming machine. Thank you.
This was the first part of our interview with Atmos. Please click on the next episode to listen to the second part. Thank you for listening to the Poetry Lighthouse. If you liked this episode, don't forget to share and subscribe to our podcast. You can also visit our website, thepoetrylighthouse.com, where you can read and submit your works of poetry and short stories. You can also follow us on YouTube, Facebook, and Instagram to keep updated. This is the end of the episode. Thanks again, and see you next time.